Harold Landry has been granted permission to seek a trade, according to Adam Schefter. What does this mean for the Titans roster? What would Landry's trade value be? How does this affect the cap? We're going to react to all of this now. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Oh, welcome everyone to another episode, another emergency episode. This is an emergency, Justin. We are doing it. I know we talked about this yesterday, but we are doing it. This is an emergency episode. This qualifies as apparently the Titans have been the Titans want to move Harold Landry, or Harold Landry wants to be moved. We don't know the exact details here. All we know is the Titans have granted Harold Landry permission to seek a trade. Justin, crazy news to wake up to on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah, didn't necessarily expect this, but I will say it's something that, myself, you, a lot of people in Titans media have alluded to wondering if it's a possibility.
Yeah.
It was 2 GMs ago now that signed Harold Landry to a 5-year, $87.5 million extension. Since then, he tore his ACL. He was initially slow to come back from it. In 2024, this past season, he led the team in sacks with 9. But I don't think that tells the full story. Okay, the eye test tells you he was pretty inefficient from a snap-to-snap basis. And then you look at Pro Football Focus, and we take these things with a grain of salt, but it was very much in line with my analysis. He had the worst pass rushing grade of anyone on the team who had minimum qualifiers for pass rushing snaps. He was the worst one among Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, Tavondre Sweat, and Sebastian Joseph Day. Those 4 players had better pass rushing grades. He was 3rd in pressures on the team. Jeffrey Simmons and Arden Key had more than him. Those are the only 2 players that should be in the ballpark, but let's be honest. The way they're paying Harold Landry, the position that he plays, he should lead the team in pressures. Okay, he was 3rd on the team, and again, my eye test would agree with that. Very inefficient snap-to-snap basis, a lot of coverage sacks, a lot of second effort sacks, and they were 3rd worst in the league in sacks. They only had 32 of them, and they're paying him $87.5 million total contract. The production just no longer matches the salary. Going into this year, he's got a base salary of $17.5 million. I'm going to let you give us the rest of the numbers, but his cap hit is over $24 million. I mean, that is an extremely bloated number for a guy that's not producing like a number 1 pass rusher, and they're paying him to be that. They're one of the worst pass rushing teams in the league. We've talked about him taking a pass rusher number 1. We've talked about them splurging in free agency. It's just not matching the dollar value, and it is time that they move on from him.
It's interesting to me. This is a tough conversation because I really like Harold Landry as a player. I think everything you're saying is accurate. Like, is Harold Landry on that tier of guys like a Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa, the guys that can line up one-on-one and beat the man across from them in a pass rushing set, in an obvious pass situation? I don't know that has ever been Harold Landry's game. Like, we have seen him use that dip move to get by weaker tackles, but when it comes to really going up against the best offensive lines, he's always been kind of stonewalled. But at the same time, he is a extremely high effort, high motor guy he's relentless. And yeah, you said he had a lot of coverage sacks. You still need guys like that. You need guys that are going to hustle their ass off and make those coverage sacks happen, because otherwise it turns into the QB scrambling for 15 yards or something. It's not always just because there's great coverage doesn't always lead to a sack unless you have guys like Harold Landry. He's also very versatile. You can drop him into coverage, which allows you to do things with your front to disguise where the rush is coming from and still be covered on the back end, which is really nice to have as a defensive coordinator. So there are a lot of valuable aspects of Harold Landry's game.
And he's a useful run defender too.
And he's a good run defender.
He's not incredible, but he's certainly not a liability either.
And it was one of the knocks on him coming out of Boston College was, can he defend the run? Because he's not the biggest guy, but he has been a really solid run defender for this Titans team. So you look at all that and you say, like, the Titans, on top of all that, as you mentioned, that we're talking about the Titans taking a pass rusher number 1 overall. Like, this is already a weak group. The edge group the Titans have is already a weak group. And now you're talking about jettisoning their best edge rusher, even if the numbers don't back up that he's their best pressure getter. He's still their number 1 dominant edge rusher. The problem that contradicts everything I just said is that you are paying him too much for what he is. And that's not obviously the current regime's fault. That's John Robinson's fault, the one who negotiated and signed this contract. But at the end of the day, like, this roster gets a lot worse if you send Harold Landry off of it, depending on what you get in return. But I mean, we could talk about realistic trade value here in a second. But first, like, yeah, you mentioned the numbers. I believe how it works is the Titans are only on the hook for his base salary, even though he would have a dead cap hit of $13.1 million. That's if you cut him. And if you cut him with a post June 1st designation, then you would only have a $6.5 million dead cap, which means you're saving, upwards of $24 million there against the cap. So I do think financially it makes sense to trade him. You look at what Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker have said about accumulating top 100 picks. Can you get a top 100 pick for Harold Landry? You probably could get a top 100 pick. I mean, in that
no.
borderline range.
I'm going to say no.
You don't think he's worth a top 100 pick? He's a day 3 guy?
With the contract, yes, because I think the contract lowers the interest around the league. Like, I don't know that anyone's trading for him at that current contract. To be like, you talked about the numbers. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not getting paid like those guys either. We see what those guys get paid nowadays. He's making about $17.5 million. I think the production he gives you is worth less than that, right? It's probably worth somewhere in the 10 to 12 million per year range for a pass rusher. I just don't think on that deal, the commitment, the cash commitment, the salary cap commitment, another team would be taking on, it's going to hurt the Titans in negotiations. I don't think they get a top 100 pick for him. I'd be shocked, stunned, happy, surprised if they did. I think this is like a 4th or 5th rounder. I would guess a 5th, which sounds low, but I think the Titans would take all the draft capital they can get. I think they'd rid themselves of a contract that they clearly consider to be a bad one, because that's why they've given them permission to seek a trade to begin with. They're losing a lot of leverage in negotiations with the number. I wouldn't be shocked if they can't trade him at all because of the contract and they got to cut him, or they got to do what Zach said on his Twitter, Zach Lyons on his Twitter account, where they got to agree to pay a portion of it to increase what they get back.
Well, that's the thing. You don't trade Harold Landry if you're not getting a top 100 pick, because you're not going to draft someone in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round that's going to come in and give you anywhere close to the production that Landry gave you, even if you're not satisfied with his production. So if that means you have to pay some of that salary in order to get the draft pick to be better, the compensation you're receiving to be better, then you do that. No question about it. The whole point here is to acquire valuable draft capital, not picks that you're going to select a special team or a backup or somebody that is, I mean, that would be crazy to me if they trade him for a 5th round pick, because you are just making your team worse and you're not even acquiring assets to try to improve. You're acquiring an asset that you're going to spend on a backup linebacker or something. That's stupid. That's just absolutely dumb to me.
I mean, it's not apples for apples, right? Like, for example, if they get a 4th round pick, you don't have to replace Harold Landry with the 4th round pick. Maybe you're drafting Abdul Carter number 1 overall and signing Josh Sweat, and that's how you replace it. And then with the extra capital, you're getting a starting safety, or you're getting a starting guard, or you're getting a starting linebacker. Like, some of those positions they have holes at that you can, if you make the right move, address in the 4th. They got Amani Hooker in the 4th round. They've gotten linebackers and guards before in the 4th round. They've gotten corners in the 4th round. So it's like, I don't think it's replacing, of course you know this, but it's not replacing Harold Landry like for like with that pick. It's extra capital to address another hole. And you're addressing edge with a more premium pick and with premium dollars in free agency, I would think.
I think they would probably have to do that. I mean, they would need to add 2 edges to this roster, and Abdul Carter at number 1 overall, or in a trade back scenario to number 3 overall, like that definitely would make even more sense for this team. As much as I don't want them to go that route, I can understand why it would make perfect sense to do that, especially if you believe Abdul Carter is a, quote, generational pass rusher. And we're going to use Mike Borgonzi's definition of a guy who elevates the team and not once in a generation, which is the literal definition of generational. And I get what you're saying about, you wouldn't replace him with that pick. And that's not what I meant either. But this is also, Mike Borgonzi said at the combine yesterday that they want to fill as many holes as they can through free agency, so they have more room and flexibility to draft best player available in the draft, which means that you are going to have to fill the holes in free agency. And even the players you're talking about picking, a linebacker, a safety, or whatever, you're going to want to get, veteran guys, even if they're very low paid and like backup level veterans that you would feel okay about if they had to start, because you're not going to throw a rookie 4th round safety on the field. Like, you're not going to throw a rookie out there that you draft on day 3 as a day 1 starter anyway, at any position on the field. Like, I would be shocked if anyone they pick on day 3 comes in as a day 1 starter. So you're going to have, it's just team building wise, I get why you want to get off this contract and acquire draft capital, but I will stick to my guns and say that if you are not getting a day 2 pick, it's not going to help the short-term roster at all. It's going to be massively hurtful to the short-term roster. Now, if you don't care about the short term and you're trying to build whatever through the long haul, then I get it. But I mean, it's just kind of crazy to me that they would do that for such low return.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance, to be honest with you, that this team is punting on 2025. Like I know that's not what the fan base wants to hear, and we'll know for sure based on what they do at quarterback, right? Like that's going to tell us what they think about their chance to play and compete in 2025. But I think the line of thinking is acquire as much draft capital as you can, and they do value 4th and 5th round picks. They see a bad contract here. They see an aging player who's not producing the way they expect or they pay him to produce. And it's only going to get worse, more than likely, right, as time goes on, as he gets older. So I just think they see a chance to move off a bad contract and get more draft capital, even if it's not a top 100 pick. If it's the 115th pick in the draft, to be honest with you, I still think they do it. I want to read a couple of Zach Lyons' tweets over the situation. Earlier today, when the news came out, he said, trading or releasing Landry pre-June 1st, just to clarify, it's $10.95 million cleared in cap space, but it's $17.5 million in actual cash freed up, right? Actual cash. If they designate him as a post-June release, then that $10.95 million in cap space becomes the full 17.5. So I think that's their alternative here if they don't trade him, is they designate him as a post-June cut. Now, keep in mind, you could do that now. I think most of our listeners know this. You could cut him now, designate him as a June 1st cut. What that means is the money available in savings, so the $17.5 million in this situation, only becomes available for you to spend in June, right? And moving forward. You can't spend that in March when free agency opens. Now, It in one hand, it sucks because, of course, you'd like to spend it immediately for the first, second, third wave of free agency. But keep in mind, the Titans are already in a pretty decent position from a salary cap perspective. They've got enough money to make moves in March, aggressive moves if they want to, in March, without needing that $17.5 million. It would just be about creating future space, moving off a bad contract. Now, again, that to me is if you cannot trade him. That's the move if you can't trade him. So I want to read another tweet Zach tweeted yesterday. I almost wonder if he knew this was coming. And, hint, hint, wink, wink. He said, this has nothing to do with cap space. So the Titans decide to move on from Landry. Although cutting him or negotiating a pay cut would be a plus, it's about the cash and him not living up to the contract. If you could spend the $17.5 million in cash elsewhere, along with the 10.9 in cap space, again, if you cut him immediately or trade him immediately, that's the initial savings of you would. And keep in mind, a lot of people don't realize when it comes to cash flow, NFL teams don't always have what you think they have. Okay. So when it comes to the 17.5 million in actual cash, think about the Titans paying multiple coaching staffs. Think of the cash spent last year on Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed. Think about the cash spent on a new stadium that's going down right now. So,
yeah.
I'm not here to speculate or say that's a guarantee, but it's always nice to have available cash, especially when you could take it from a place that you don't think you're getting a good value for your buck.
I guess it's not good value for your buck, but again, he's still a guy that helps your defense. But yeah, I get all of it.
They get worse without him. I agree with you on that sense. They're definitely worse without him.
Not even close. But anyway, if he is moved, like hopefully they use those assets to build up a better roster around him. And I do think they would attack free agency and the draft. And one of the things Mike Borgonzi said at the Combine, talking to Ian Rappaport on NFL Network, was he was going through positions that have a lot of depth in this class. And the first thing he said was the D-line, the edge rusher group, a lot of depth there. So maybe the Titans, if they take Abdul Carter, double dip. Or maybe they feel they don't need to take Abdul Carter because there's a ton of depth in this class and they can get the guy they like at 35 and take Cam Moore at number 1. That's what I'll keep telling myself here, because definitely the odds of drafting Abdul Carter for the Titans, not only in the sports betting markets, but just like the logical odds, have gone up a lot today with this news coming down that Abdul Carter is going to be mock drafted to the Titans a lot more because of this Harold Landry news. So I just want Titans fans to be prepared for that.
Well, I'm glad you said it because I was going to make you admit it. Like, I actually just wrote an article on Titan Size. It's already live. That I do think this increases the chances that they're taking Abdul Carter at number 1 overall, right? It was already a need, as you said. Now, if they're getting rid of Landry, which I think this eventually is going to end with Landry not on the roster. Now, there's a small possibility they negotiate a pay cut, but the more likely outcome here is that Landry's not on the 2025 team. As you said, now you've got two massive holes at edge rusher. You're probably not filling both of those with veterans, right? Like, I don't think they're going out and paying Josh Sweat and paying someone else, right? They're going to probably pay one pass rusher. The other one's going to have to come through the draft. And sure, you could do that in the second or third round, and you might just have an okay edge room with, say a Josh Sweat or an Arden Key, and then a second or third round rookie. But if you do it at number 1 overall and you've got Abdul Carter or Josh Sweat and Arden Key, that is a very acceptable, probably even above average edge rushing room.
Yeah, I think that's an above average. I think that's a good pass rushing group. I mean, obviously that would mean Abdul Carter is good. Like, we don't know. He could come in and be terrible. But yeah, I mean,
and
assuming
I also
Abdul
think
Carter
neither Josh
lives
Sweat's,
up to that.
Josh Sweat's a number 2 at most, and Key's an appropriate 3. So I'm leaving some wiggle room there for it to just be above average.
Yeah, well, Abdul Carter would have to come in.
I don't think.
Abdul Carter would have to be a number 1 pick level edge if you draft him at number 1. He's gonna have to be that guy, one of the dudes in the NFL that teams are scared of. So, I mean, yeah, this definitely increases the odds that the Titans take Abdul Carter. But we'll see what happens with Harold Landry. We'll keep you posted on everything here on the Music City Audible channel. Make sure you are subscribed. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and drop a comment below. Are you surprised? Do you want Harold Landry gone? What would you accept in a trade? What would you not accept? Let us know in the comments below. And yeah, an emergency episode. I guess it's a 4-episode week for us, Justin, because as we said yesterday, later, I guess tomorrow now, we got Ben Kurt coming on the show to break down the quarterbacks, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So until then, y'all stay safe out there. And I think this is a good, call it stay safe out there and
tighten down.
A Broadway sports media production.